Hello, hi, my name is Sarah Russell and I am a clinical exercise specialist. I'm here this evening to talk about hydration, hydration for anybody who's got a stoma. So my background as a clinical exercise specialist, I've studied exercise physiology, sport and exercise science, nutrition, and I've actually had a stoma since 2010. So hydration is something I am very, very passionate about for everyone, for athletes and for anyone who is, particularly who has a stoma. So I'm hoping this camera's going to work okay. So bear with me while I just kind of figure out the technology here. Like everyone, we're all at home and I live in the middle of nowhere with really bad Wi-Fi. So bear with me and I'm doing my best. Okay, so I'm going to talk for about the next 30 minutes just about good hydration practice, and please feel free to pop some comments in the comments section on this post and I'll try and answer them. We've also got some questions that have been sent in to us in advance. So we did this on Monday and it was really popular, so lots of really great feedback, and so we wanted to repeat it this evening just to hopefully reach a different group of people if you weren't able to catch it on Monday. So please feel free just to ask any questions and we'll get to them. Okay, so as I was saying, I've had my ileostomy for 10 years and I am incredibly passionate about hydration. I think it's one of the most overlooked things for people with, particularly with an ileostomy. But actually, when you look at a lot of the research, you look at a lot of the evidence, and you look at the sort of the general population, a lot of people need to look at their hydration practice in more detail. I really do believe it's one of the most important aspects of good health, and people can feel an awful lot better when they get their hydration strategy right. So the first thing I'm just going to say is all the information that we give in this Facebook Live is not to replace any information that you may be given by your clinical team, by your doctor, by your nurse. So please do check with them about any specifics relating to your own individual medical needs. But the information we are giving in here is based on evidence and expert opinion and is accurate and up to date. So first of all, I just want to tell you a little bit about some of the things that Convatec have recently produced. So we've got a number of hydration resources that you can access. So we've got this leaflet, which you can download from the Convatec website or get it sent to you at home. And that comes with a drinks bottle and also a little hydration P chart. I'll talk about that in a second. There is a longer hydration article written by myself, which you can download from the website, and also a publication which myself and Caroline Ridoni, who's the clinical nursing director for Convatec, published in the Gastrointestinal Nursing Journal. So let's get started by talking about hydration. So what I want to say is, what I really kind of like to think about is aiming for optimal hydration. So thinking about trying to be as healthy and well hydrated as you can, rather than trying to avoid dehydration. And I think those two things are quite different. Optimal hydration will enable you to feel healthy, to feel well, feel energized and able to exercise and be active. And those are really, really important things. Now, I'm going to talk about hydration in relation to people with an ileostomy, with a urostomy, with a colostomy, because they're slightly different. I have an ileostomy, and I've developed my own strategy over the years. And I think that's what's really important, is that everyone is different. So everybody has very different hydration needs, depending on their own individual body, their own individual medical needs. Your hydration requirements will also change from day to day. So super, super important to really listen to your body and to be really intuitive with your hydration needs and focus on what you as an individual need, as opposed to trying to aim for a specific set amount of litres per day, whatever it might be. So what I want to encourage you to do is to think about really being intuitive, tuning into your body and thinking about your own signs and symptoms of optimal hydration. So the first thing to think about, and there's just a question now, what are the signs of dehydration? So let's just start with that. So the sort of typical signs would be feeling groggy, having a headache, feeling tired, not being able to concentrate, a bit irritable, maybe feeling thirsty, dry mouth, and having dark coloured urine and not urinating very often. So we've created a little P chart, and what we're aiming for is a nice pale straw colour urine, and that's a sign of good hydration. If it's kind of down towards this end, it's kind of like a ginger colour, it's yellow, it's maybe even really dark, then that's a sign you're really quite dehydrated. If you're very dehydrated, down at this end of the spectrum, then please do speak to a medical professional nurse, because that's a sign that something's not quite right with your body. So, but most people typically sit around here in the middle with this kind of yellow coloured urine. So we want to try and get it a little bit more straw coloured. What's really important to say at this point is we don't want very, very clear urine, because that's actually a sign of potentially drinking too much water, flushing electrolytes out of your body. Now that's applicable to everybody, people without stomas, but probably more importantly for people with ileostomies who are at risk of dehydration the most. And the reason for that is because people with an ileostomy are losing more fluid from their stoma on a daily basis. And so people with an ileostomy really need to pay attention to their hydration needs. If you have a colostomy, hydration is still super important, because you need to try and avoid blockages and try and avoid constipation. So making sure your fluid levels are high is really important as well. And people with a urostomy, you won't lose more fluid, unlike someone with an ileostomy, but what we see in people with a urostomy is that sometimes it's tempting not to drink, because that means if you don't drink, you don't have to deal with the bag and emptying the bag. And that's normal, but it's just being aware of that, if that's a bit of a habit that's crept in for you, because then feeling dehydrated and groggy can really impact your ability to work, function and exercise. So we want to aim for this optimal hydration status, whatever type of stoma that you have. So signs of dehydration, just to recap: grogginess, headache, feeling thirsty, and sort of like darker coloured urine. So we need to be aiming for that lovely pale straw colour. If you haven't urinated for like maybe 3 or 4 hours, if you've been out all day and you suddenly think, oh, I haven't been to the toilet, then maybe you need to be thinking about drinking a little bit more frequently. Okay, so please do pop any questions in the comments now. I can see them, I can access them, which is good, because I couldn't on Monday, and we'll go through them. Right, so achieving optimum hydration. So the first thing really what a lot of people ask is, what should I drink and how much should I drink? And those things are very individual. So just really recapping that theory of being intuitive, listening to your body and thinking about what you as an individual needs. No one can tell you that you have to drink 2 litres of water a day or 2 litres of fluid a day. That may be too much, it may be too little. You have to be driven by your body's sign and symptoms. So if you're having those symptoms of dehydration, a bit groggy, a bit tired, and a lot of us do feel like that a lot of the time, that's a sign that we need to start thinking about upping our hydration levels or choosing a different type of drink. Now, the type of drink that you choose, different drinks are absorbed by the body in different ways. So often people with an ileostomy are advised to drink an isotonic drink or a sports drink. And the reason for this is because these drinks are higher in sodium, and people with an ileostomy will often need a little bit more sodium. Sports drinks are kind of based on the theory of having some electrolytes, so potassium, sodium and also glucose in the drink. And they will also provide some hydration. Now, they're all very well, and a lot of people get along fine with drinking Lucozade. So sort of drinks like this, Lucozade Sport, or other kind of own brand drinks, Powerade, those sorts of drinks. The only issue with them is that they're often high in sugar, And we really all need to be reducing the amount of sort of processed sugar and unnecessary sugar in our diets. And they're actually quite low in sodium. So if you have an ileostomy, and particularly if you have a high output ileostomy, it might be best to think about choosing something like Diarrhelite, or something like St. Mark's solution, which you can make up yourself at home. And a lot of people with ileostomies are often recommended to drink St. Mark's solution. Now, we have created another video which you can access on the Convatec website, just showing how to actually make up St. Mark's solution with the right ingredients. So you would need glucose powder, bicarbonate soda and table salt, and you mix it up into a litre, exactly the right proportions. And then it's not the greatest taste, but if you can tolerate it, it will often make you feel a lot better. I'll talk about whether you add squash to it a little bit later on, because that's often a big question that comes up. And Diarrhelite, you know, I personally, I've got quite high output ileostomy. I do a lot of running, I do a lot of exercise. I drink Diarrhelite every day. The important thing with Diarrhelite is to make it up exactly as the packet says. This is quite a great question there from Glenn. Thank you, Glenn. Yeah, you made a really, really good point. Really important to mix up Diarrhelite exactly as the packet says. A lot of people just put one sachet in a litre of water. Now, it's designed to be exactly the World Health Organization sort of oral rehydration solution sort of recommendation. So the right amount of glucose and the right amount of sodium. And that helps the fluid be absorbed into your body. So it's something called osmolarity, and a drink needs to have just a small amount of glucose and the right amount of sodium, and that pulls the fluid molecules into your body, and that aids absorption of fluid. So it's kind of the basis of any oral rehydration solution, and the theory of oral rehydration solutions, particularly in the third world. I travelled to India a few years ago, and everyone was using oral rehydration solutions then. They actually get them made up into a litre, big sachet, and it's just kind of very normal day-to-day practice. So as Glenn says there in the comments, really important to make it up exactly as the packet states. So 1 sachet to 200 mils of water. Now, my personal practice, and I'm not saying this is right for everybody, but it's something that I found really, really helps me, is I drink 400 mils of Diarrhelite every morning, so 2 sachets in 400 mils. And my sort of theory is staying ahead of dehydration. So that enables me to feel well, hydrated, energized, and able to exercise. And I think that kind of preemptive, sort of preventative strategy actually is something that a lot of people miss. They wait until they feel unwell before they start drinking something like Diarrhelite. So my advice would be to just to think about that. So if you're feeling often feeling headachy, groggy, tired, and you have an ileostomy, then to think about maybe including Diarrhelite in your daily strategy. It's worth trying. You can get Diarrhelite on prescription, to speak to your GP about that. If you want to make up St. Mark's solution, you just need your ingredients. Glucose powder, because it's absorbed really quickly into water. At the worst, if you can't get it, then maybe just try caster sugar. It's not exactly the same, but it's not as bad. Just mix it with a little bit of warm water and then top it up with cold water. And that will kind of just do the same. So the important thing here is the presence of sodium and the presence of glucose in a solution, which then shunts the fluid molecule into your cells and tissue of your body, and that helps to hydrate you. So drinking lots and lots of plain water isn't often recommended. I train a lot of marathon runners and a lot of athletes, and I run marathons myself, often in hot countries. And drinking lots and lots of plain water isn't really recommended, even if you don't have an ileostomy. So what that does, it can develop into a condition called hyponatremia, where you flush the electrolytes out of your body. So drinking lots and lots of water, I'm not saying don't drink water, just avoid drinking lots and lots. So electrolyte solutions are really important, whether it's St. Mark's or Diarrhelite. Another really great product which I use a lot of is something called SOS Rehydrate. And this is, it's kind of marketed as a sports drink, but it is now available on prescription in the UK, and it is made up to exactly the same kind of prescription, if you like, as Diarylight. So it's got the right amount of sodium, right amount of glucose. It also has potassium and magnesium in it. So I tend to use that during sport, during running, during any kind of athletic activity, and I will use Diarylight on a day-to-day basis. Right, so talk a little bit more about some other products that are out there that often people talk about. So there's things like these little tablets that you can sort of pop in water, and these are often zero sugar, lots of electrolytes but no sugar. So they taste great, and people think that they're good because there's no sugar in them, but actually they're missing that vital ingredient, which is the glucose, which helps shunt the fluid molecule into your body. These ORS tablets, they're actually pretty good. There's just a little bit of glucose in them, so they're not bad. Diarylight is probably the go-to because it's made of exactly the right proportions. So that's kind of the thing I generally tend to work with. Although last weekend I kind of got caught out with my hydration. I wasn't feeling great, and the only thing that really worked for me was making up a litre of St. Mark's and kind of desperately trying to get it down, and that really did help perk me up and feel a lot better. So please do pop your questions in the comments down there, and I'll try and get to them. So I'll just go through a couple of questions that we've already had in. So someone says, I am a keen runner and I want to run a marathon, but I'm worried about staying hydrated throughout. So the things to sort of think about there are whatever type of exercise that you're doing, whether it's marathon running, going to the gym, going for a walk, going to play golf, whatever it might be, trying to get pre-hydrated is actually really important. So what you drink in the 12 to 24 hours prior to any kind of exercise is almost more important than what you drink during. So starting any exercise well hydrated is really important. So this concept of being optimally hydrated kind of all the time will enable you to then have the energy and be well hydrated enough to exercise at any kind of point. So thinking about almost pre-hydrating with electrolyte drinks so you're ready to then exercise is one of the most important lessons that I've certainly learned, and I use that with all my athletes, with stomas or without. But then during a marathon, particularly lengthy exercise, during exercise you can lose up to 2 litres of fluid per hour in very hot conditions. So if you're exercising in hot conditions and you've got an ileostomy, having a solid hydration strategy is going to be really important. So use of electrolyte drinks to ensure optimum absorption of fluid, replacement of sodium, and making sure that you're getting enough fluid in. So using something like SOS during exercise. I know runners who don't have stomas that use Diarylight during running as well, and carrying it in some kind of camelback or some kind of pouch around your waist, which you can easily access. So just tips like that can make a really, really big difference. And what you often find is if you start using an electrolyte drink more frequently, you'll find that you probably actually have to drink less fluid overall because you're absorbing it more effectively into your body. So I hope that sort of makes sense. When I first started running with my ileostomy, I was really nervous about getting dehydrated, and I think what's happened over the years is I've become much better at absorbing fluid, and my gut has adjusted, and I think what's happened is I'm less worried and less nervous about it. So I'm much more confident about going out running now and maintaining good hydration, but I've got a really solid hydration strategy. Okay, so another question here. I've always thought water was the best way to keep hydrated. Someone at my local stoma group told me it's not and mentioned something about electrolytes. So exactly what I've been talking about. So I'm not saying don't drink water at all because it tastes great, it's really refreshing, it's healthy, but if you have an ileostomy and it's particularly a high output ileostomy, choosing some of your fluid from an electrolyte drink is really important to boost that absorption of the fluid into your body. So we want to avoid drinking gallons and gallons of plain water. That's not what we want to do. If you have a colostomy or a urostomy, it's possibly slightly less, there's less requirement there for you to avoid loads of plain water. You can probably drink as normal, but certainly for people with an ileostomy, you just need to be a little bit more cautious. So are there any foods that can help with hydration? Yes, absolutely. So a lot of fruit and vegetables will have high fluid content. So if you can include as much of that in your body, in your diet as possible. Soups, smoothies, those sorts of things, yogurts, anything that's kind of more of like a watery end of the food spectrum, you'll get some fluid from as well. So people often ask how much they should drink in a day, and there really is not a set answer. So we used to talk about sort of 8 glasses of water or 2 litres of water. And that's not really based on any evidence, because some people will need less than that. Some people will need much more than that. So you've got to tune into your own personal needs, and you've got to tune into your signs and symptoms of any kind of dehydration. And on a daily basis, it will change. So as we move into the summer and the weather gets a bit warmer, thinking about, if you're going to be out in the garden, maybe doing some gardening or out walking the dog, just really upping your game a little bit with your hydration, and just thinking about taking drinks with you, what you're going to need, and not getting caught out. Buying water in shops and things isn't obviously as easy at the moment. So making sure that you're prepared and you take stuff with you, I think, is really, really important. One of the things my husband's found at the moment, he's working at home. He doesn't have a stoma. He's working at home, and what he's found is he finds his routine has changed, and he's just not drinking anywhere near as much as he was. Maybe more tea, more coffee. I'll come on to that in a second. But he's invested in this little bottle. I think it was just from Tesco's, and on the side it's just got like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, and then good job, drink more. And he's actually found that really helpful, and it's just encouraged him to drink a bit more throughout the day. Having a little reminder on your phone, don't wait until you're thirsty, because being really thirsty isn't a good sign of, you're often dehydrated by the time you become quite thirsty. So kind of staying ahead of that thirst and almost drinking to a bit of a sort of strategy, little and often throughout the day, is going to be really, really helpful. What we want to try and maintain is this kind of pale straw-coloured, urine, constantly throughout the day. So instead of sort of peaks and troughs of dark and light urine, which will indicate that you're drinking a lot and then having a period of not drinking very much. So try and aim for a nice consistent sort of pale straw colour, which means that you're well hydrated throughout the day, rather than drinking a lot, filling up your bladder, needing to pee, and then going for a long time without a drink. So little and often throughout the day is a good strategy. Okay, is drinking tea and coffee a good way to stay hydrated? So really great question. Years and years ago, we used to talk about tea and coffee not being included in your hydration or in your fluid allowance for the day, because caffeine was thought to be dehydrating. Now, caffeine stimulates urine production, but that doesn't mean that tea and coffee aren't included. So tea and coffee are included in your sort of fluid requirements for the day, apart from really, really strong coffee. So, moderate to weak coffee, tea are included, and you'll obtain fluid from both of those drinks. The only thing, sadly not, is alcohol. But so what you're aiming for is a mixed fluid sort of intake throughout the day. So tea, coffee, some water, electrolyte solutions, juices, squash, smoothies, whatever you like the taste of, because if you like the taste of it, you're more likely to drink it. So finding something you enjoy is really important. Okay, let me see what other questions I've got. Please do pop questions. I can see there's a few people in the group, which is lovely. So please do pop some questions in the comments there. That would be great. Okay, so I've recently had ileostomy surgery, and I've had literally no guidance on the best way to stay hydrated. do you have any advice? I used to be very good at staying hydrated, but wondered if I'll have to do anything differently now I've got a stoma. So having an ileostomy again, with an ileostomy, typical output from an ileostomy is something like 600 mils to 1,000 mils in a day. Now, obviously, no one will really measure that accurately, but if you have very watery output and you're emptying your bag a lot, then the chances are you'll be, towards the top end of that, or even more, even higher. So, what's really important is to probably choose an electrolyte drink of some sort. So there was some really good research done by a team in Southampton. And they studied a group of people with ileostomies, and they found they were all showing clinical signs of being dehydrated without really showing any symptoms. So these people kind of going around in a slightly chronically dehydrated state. Now, the conclusion of this particular research was that they concluded most people with an ileostomy were probably slightly dehydrated, and that they would benefit from an electrolyte drink on a daily basis. So that really is my advice. Now, I would go down the Diarrhelite route, and I would have, 2 to 4 sachets of Diarrhelite per day. Speak with your stoma nurse, speak with your GP about the appropriateness of that strategy for you personally and any other medical conditions you might have. But hydration is a really important part of good health, and I think we just need to keep that all in balance. And so that would be my advice. But obviously, please do speak to your GP and your stoma nurse to get specific advice. Back to the isotonic drinks. When I first had my surgery, my surgeon said to me, drink sports drinks, drink Lucozade Sport. And I thought, And when I started looking at the research a little bit more and looking at the amount of sodium that was in it, and because of my background in sports science, I knew that it was probably too high in sugar and too low in sodium. I have heard a story of somebody who was advised to drink Lucozade Sport, and they did, and they started drinking about 6 bottles a day. And that is obviously not good for good health from a weight gain perspective and the level of sugar within that. So that's not a great strategy. That said, if an isotonic sports drink is all you can get your hands on and you're feeling really grotty, then that is perfect. Just grab that, and it probably will perk you up and make you feel better. But it's, as I say, the sodium content is really quite low. And even with my athletes, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that as the best type of drink for them. I would go down the SOS, which has got much less sugar. Really good for anyone with diabetes because it's very low in sugar, but there's just enough glucose in it to shunt that, and to create that absorption requirement. That's really important. As I say, that's now available on prescription as well. So only just to speak to your GP about that. Has anybody got any other questions? Pop them in there. Let's have a look. Okay. Is the colour of urine more indicative than volume? I don't need to urinate often, but it's often quite light in colour. I think colour of urine probably is more indicative than volume, because actually what that means is you're absorbing the fluid well into your body. So if that's the case, then I think you're probably doing all right. What we need to avoid is excessive, very clear urine, or very scant, very dark urine. So if you're sort of in the middle somewhere, and that sounds like you are, then that sounds pretty good. Okay, another chap here says, ileostomy 14 years, really struggling with hydration, hospitalised twice, blah, blah. The tightrope between not enough and too much is really tricky. Okay, so great. So David, I don't know your personal circumstances, and it would really probably be advisable to maybe get some advice from a dietitian or from a gastroenterologist or your GP, because I can't give you specific advice, but I would probably, looking at that, I would probably up the Diarrhelite a little bit and just see how you feel. There are some days where I can personally drink 1,500 mils, 2 litres of Diarrhelite in a day, or maybe even start trying to drink some St. Mark's solution, and just see how that makes you feel. So again, just be really intuitive. Getting caught out, if you kind of maybe go for 3 or 4 hours without a drink, or you're busy. I find it when I'm talking a lot, or if I'm sleeping in an air-conditioned hotel. Those sorts of things will really change my hydration requirements. So I then have to be really on it. If I'm on a long-haul flight, for example, I'll drink Diarylight the whole time. I don't even touch water or any other drinks. It's just purely Diarylight, and that is the only thing that kind of gets me through. Otherwise, I'll get off that flight feeling really grotty. So it sounds like you need a little bit more support. Perhaps speak to a stoma nurse. Contact our stoma nurse helpline if you want to. That's available there for you as well. And I think you're right. It's a really tight act, and I think when you have an ileostomy, if your ileostomy is the higher end of the output spectrum, it gets really tricky. And it took me probably about 2 years to work out a really sensible hydration strategy for myself. And it just is Diarylight most days, with St. Mark's solution if I feel really grotty. So have a play around with it. Oh, I can see that you had a doctor suggest you add 5 sachets to 500 mils. Yeah, so sometimes it's recommended to make Diarylight up to double strength. So that would be instead of 1 sachet to 200 mils of water, that's 1 sachet to 100 mils of water. So this is what you're talking about there. And what that does, it just brings the sodium level up to very high levels like it is in St. Mark's solution. The problem with that is it also increases glucose levels and it also increases potassium levels. Not that it's necessarily a bad thing, but it wouldn't be something I would necessarily recommend to do every day. And if feeling grotty, I would go down the St. Mark's solution rather than the double strength Diarylight route. So Lynn says, do we need to take Diarylight even if we don't exercise much? It really depends on how you feel. So all of this, you need to be guided by your own personal kind of needs. So be intuitive, tune into how you feel and tune into how, what you're doing on a daily basis. So some days I don't need to do as much, other days I really need to focus on it and work hard on it. Really is person by person, individual by individual, and day by day, because it's different. So you've just got to find your own strategy. You might not get it right every day, but if we think about that research paper that was done, particularly for people with ileostomies, the conclusion from that paper was that actually most people with an ileostomy would benefit from some kind of electrolyte replacement drink on a daily basis. So in answer to your question, Lynn, possibly if you have an ileostomy, then yes. Colostomy and urostomy, less so. That said, with all my marathon runners, I recommend that they drink Diarylight as well the night before a marathon, the day after a marathon, to help them recover, to help them reabsorb fluid. So don't see it as a medicine that you have to kind of leave to the last minute until you're unwell. See it as something as a preventative strategy. So Joe says, should we be constantly sipping to stay ahead of dehydration or drink large amounts? I think I talked about that a little bit earlier as well. So yeah, absolutely. Little and often throughout the day is a much better strategy, and then your body's going to be absorbing it rather than kind of just filling up your bladder with fluid. SOS is very good. David says, yeah, absolutely right. It's a really, really good product. I think it's probably one of the best on the market, and it's been designed by a doctor, and it's, as I say, it's now available on prescription as well. So yeah, really, really good choice. And because it's a little bit low in sugar, it's got a little bit of sweetener in it. So the sugar level is just enough to help with the absorption, but not so much that you've got a sugary sports drink. So yeah, really good option. Yeah, so Mina's saying they're worrying about diabetes and the sugar content. So yeah, absolutely right. We don't want to be drinking really high sugar drinks all the time. So choosing a drink which has got just the right amount of glucose to aid the absorption of fluid is actually really what's important. Of course, there's lots of factors go into developing diabetes, which is what you're talking about there, not just sugar intake. So, we've got to make lifestyle choices in all the right ways. And hydration is a really important aspect of maintaining energy levels and the ability to then go and exercise it. But SOS is a little bit lower in sugar than most, and it will do exactly the same thing. Yeah, so, okay. Can the total removal of a colon also impact the absorption of key nutrients? don't know. I'm not a dietitian. I've been told it doesn't. I've been told that all nutrients are absorbed by the end of the small bowel. Caroline Udoni, who's a nurse, might pop in here with an answer to that question for you, David. I have to say I've had my ileostomy for 10 years and I'm not deficient in anything and I don't take any supplements. So maybe I'm lucky, or maybe that, you know, that is true, that we actually absorb everything by the end of the small bowel. The colon really is more around fluid and electrolytes, hence why we need a much more robust strategy around electrolyte replacement and fluid replacement. Right, good, excellent. Okay, is there a link between fluid intake and output from your stoma? Yes, it's all about fluid loss from the body, whether it's coming out of the bowel, out of the bladder. Trying to understand quite what your question is. So if you've got a very watery output, then trying to minimize that is actually really important as well. So potentially speaking to your nurse about medication, loperamide or Imodium, around reducing your stoma output. It's all about trying to reduce output versus fluid in, and trying to get that fluid balance right in your body as much as possible. And that's what we're all aiming for, is we're aiming for fluid balance. Things like sometimes aspartame, so artificial sweeteners, high sugar drinks, orange juice, you know, fruit juices, they can increase fluid, they can increase stoma output. So be really, really careful with high sugar drinks, which is another reason why I'm most often cautious about recommending isotonic sports drinks, because they're high in sugar. They can increase stoma output and actually make the situation worse. So it's very much a balancing act between stoma output and fluid intake, and trying to get your fluid balance right. And sodium is a really important part of fluid balance and maintaining fluid balance. So when we have an ileostomy, again, it's a really crucial part of that. So talking about eating vegetables and getting really watery output, yeah, that's really common. I personally, I'm not a dietitian, so this isn't dietetic advice, and again, please speak to a stoma nurse or a dietitian about this, but my own personal experience is if I have some kind of carbohydrate with my vegetables or with my salad, so some kind of bread or rice or pasta, that just helps to create a bit of bulk, and that stops that from happening. You know, so, and the different types of vegetables will have a different effect. So it's really just about experimenting and finding out what works best for you. So Caroline's answered your question there, David. I hope that helps. Right, great, good. Glenn says, how much time before major exercise, hiking, running, would you recommend increasing hydration? So I talked about a little bit earlier, so 12 to 24 hours before any kind of big event or long run or exercise will really improve your performance and your ability to then have energy to do that. But if you can maintain this kind of optimal hydration level most days, you're going to feel more energized and more able to go and do some exercise. And that's the case for everybody. You know, I work with a lot of athletes that don't have stomas, and they're terrible at hydrating, and they feel headachy, and then they're sluggish when they're exercising. And so, yeah, it's really important I think it's one of the most underestimated aspects of health. And when we then have an ileostomy, it becomes even more tricky to balance it out. And it's around finding a strategy that works for you as an individual, and just to keep working on it. Right, has anybody got any more questions? Pop them in there. There's been a few questions about diabetes, so we've talked about that. Hopefully I've answered those. So just, I would probably go down the SOS route for if you're diabetic or diabetic, because of the lower sugar content. Certainly don't go down the sports drink. Thank you, Kevin, for answering that question. All the nurses are helping. That's great. Good. Keep the questions coming. So some more questions that have been sent in. I have a urostomy, and there doesn't seem to be much guidance out there in terms of hydration? Do you have any tips? So someone with a urostomy doesn't have any particular increased need or increased fluid loss, should we say. Drinking plenty to flush the mucus through the urostomy is really important. So keeping hydrated just to keep that urostomy healthy is really important. But the thing that we find with people with a urostomy is they often subconsciously avoid drinking, because then they have to deal with the bag and empty the bag, which is a pain. And so subconsciously they choose not to drink. And particularly leading up to any of the sporting event, that can be a really big issue. So if that's you, try and find a way to kind of work on that, because you'll feel a lot better if you're optimally hydrated, and it can be a pain. I don't have a urostomy. I don't know what that's like. I can imagine it's challenging. I was working with a chap who was a golfer, and he had bladder cancer. He'd had a urostomy, and he said, he goes and has a round of golf, and then he comes home and he has to spend the rest of the afternoon in bed because he's absolutely exhausted. And when we sort of dug into it a little bit more, we found out a bit more about what's going on. He just wasn't drinking, and he wasn't drinking when he's on the golf course because he didn't want to have to empty his bag. And what he was experiencing in the afternoon wasn't illness, it was just dehydration where he hadn't drunk enough. And he'd been exercising and walking around the golf course for hours on end. So that is, for something like that, you've just got to find a way to make it work for you. Drinking something like Diarrhelite in that situation, because you're then absorbing more fluid into your body, less goes into your bladder, and that can actually reduce urination, and that might really help in that situation as well. Okay, are there any other questions? So, okay, I want to keep on top of my hydration, but find at night that my output is high and I need to get up and go to the toilet to urinate. This is interrupting my sleep. It's like a vicious cycle. So again, a lot of people will avoid drinking into the evening because they don't want to have to get up and go to the toilet. Absolutely right. So maybe just sort of taper down your drinking, avoid caffeinated drinks in the evening, and again, try something like some Diarrhelite or something like an electrolyte solution into the evening, which will then help the body absorb the fluid, less urination, and the caffeine is a stimulant for urine production. So maybe a balance of those things might really help you as well. Obviously, if nighttime urination is a new symptom for you, then that's something to discuss with your doctor as well. And don't just, accept that it's down to drinking too much late in the evening. Right, has anyone got any more questions? Let's see. Oh, fantastic. Right, so Adam says, is it true drinking just water is bad with an ileostomy as it can make you more dehydrated? Okay, so drinking lots and lots of plain water isn't a great idea. Actually, for anybody, I'm not saying don't drink water, I'm just saying don't drink gallons and gallons and gallons of water. So over the years, what we found in the marathon running world and in the ultra running world is that people often overdrink. They're overzealous with their fluid intake. And that can lead to sodium dilution in the body, which is something called hyponatremia, and that's something none of us want. Now, if you've got an ileostomy, you're losing more sodium on a daily basis. Anyway, you're not absorbing it very well. So drinking lots of water can really push you into that kind of slightly hyponatremic state. So we want to try and avoid that. I know from a personal experience, when I've drunk lots and lots of plain water in the past, before I really figured it out, I'd feel quite washed out and quite unwell. And our sodium levels are sort of almost on a bit of a knife edge, at least mine are. So for me, I generally tend to avoid lots of plain water. I might have 1 glass a day, and the rest of my fluid comes from other places. So don't avoid plain water. It's healthy. It's, it's a good thing for you, but it's not absorbed well by the body. So we need that presence of sodium and glucose, which helps shunt the fluid molecules into your body. So I'd probably say that mixing it up with a glass of water, but then other drinks throughout the day. So some diaryl, some other electrolyte fluids, tea, coffee, juice, squash, whatever works for you. Find out your own kind of strategy. But yeah, drinking lots and lots of plain water is not what we want to do with an ileostomy for sure. Glucose powder, yeah, Joanna was just asking about glucose powder, available in most pharmacies. I've not actually found it in a supermarket. And Adam's asking about SOS. There you go. So SOS Rehydrate is a oral rehydration solution product, which is a sports drink, much lower in sugar, but just enough glucose to aid absorption of fluid molecules. So it's designed by a doctor, and it's perfectly at the right level to for optimum hydration. It's also got magnesium and potassium in it. It's my absolute go-to, and it's now available on prescription in the UK. It will probably need something you need to ask your GP about. So David saying the suggestions of diaryl and SLs are presumably also the best for sickness and bugs. Output becomes increased. Would you change the volumes? Good question. I do remember once getting altitude sickness at the top of a mountain in Morocco, and I was really, really unwell, vomiting, huge amounts of output from my stoma. It was not a nice day, and all I had with me was diaryl. I didn't have a packet of glucose and some sodium to make up St. Mark's solution. So I actually made up double strength diaryl on that occasion, and I'm pretty sure that's what prevented me from needing to go into a Moroccan hospital and have a drip. So yeah, absolutely. I think in a situation like that, if you're very unwell or you've got a bug, you know, speak to your GP, speak to your stoma nurse, obviously take advice from them first, but double strength diaryl, St. Mark's solution, you know, probably maybe make diaryl a little bit stronger than you normally would in that kind of more emergency situation. David knows SOS hydrate. So yeah, and talking about loperamide, again, that's something to discuss with your medical team, your doctor and the stoma nurse, but it's around this kind of concept of trying to reduce output from your stoma whilst optimizing the fluid that you do drink for optimal absorption into your body. So, you know, if I like to eat a diet high in fruit and vegetables, I do use loperamide to try and slow output down a little bit. That's my personal practice. That's not necessarily what's right for everybody. Again, that's something to speak to your own GP or nurse about. SOS, does it taste better than diaryl? You've got to try it and see, taste them all. I find it better during exercise, and then I'll use diaryl on a daily basis. And that's something I much just got used to, and I just knock it down because I know that I'm going to feel better with it than without it. So yeah, it's a personal preference, and you've just got to try different things and see what works for you. You know, there's often a lot of questions. Oh yeah, they're talking about the different flavors of SOS Rehydrate. I find berry is the nicest, or watermelon is really nice. Coconut, not my favorite, but try them. I think they do little sample packs. Go online, have a look anyway. Someone's talking about butternut squash to thicken up output. I absolutely agree. Butternut squash or sweet potato works really, really well for me as well. And it's about slowing down output, so you're not losing as much fluid, and you're finding a way to get that fluid back into your body to maintain fluid balance, which is really good thing. So talking about drinking, adding squash to diaryl or electrolyte tablets or St. Mark's solution. So diaryl and St. Mark's solution are made up or designed to be exactly the right amount of glucose and sodium to be absorbed optimally by the body. So adding anything to that is going to change that makeup, and it's going to change the body's ability to absorb it. So we don't want to have too much sugar. So this is known as the osmolarity of a fluid, and it's about how close it is to basically to the cells in the body and to the blood. So we want a fluid that is as close to blood osmolarity as possible. And that is basically SOS and diaryl, and they are designed to be exactly designed so they will be absorbed really well by the body. Adding sugar to that to change the flavour is going to change the absorption ability. So what I often see with people is they'll make St. Mark's solution and it's not the best tasting, it tastes like seawater, and so adding a bit of squash to that can change the taste. So, you know, maybe using a sugar-free squash to just change the taste isn't then going to change the osmolarity. You're not adding extra sugar to it. So yeah, that would definitely be a solution. But you probably don't want to add a sugary solution to your diaryl. Sugar-free electrolyte tablets, they've often got a lot of artificial sweeteners in them. So you might be better, Joanna's just asking a question there, you might be better just making up some squash, so 500 mils of squash, like normal Ribena with sugar in it to taste, quite dilute, not super strong. Add half a teaspoon of salt, and you're starting to get something. We still need that tiny amount of glucose in the drink to act as a shunt to pull it into the body. So whilst we don't want lots of sugar in our diet, it is important in a drink because it just helps as that kind of aids absorption. Could a 10-year-old daughter use diaryl daily? Good question. I don't actually know. Obviously, if she's got an ileostomy and she's got high output, then she's going to be at risk of dehydration. So probably children can drink diaryl, and I've known that some people make them into lollies, they freeze them, and children do drink them, but that would be something you'd really probably need to speak to your gastroenterologist or a stoma nurse about specifically. You know, my own kids, they don't have stomas, but I know when they've been dehydrated, they've always gone down the Lucozade route because tastes better. I'll sneak a little bit more salt into it just to kind of try and up the sodium content. But yeah, speak to your stoma nurse or speak to your GP about that. But I don't see why not, but I can't give you that specific advice. My partner takes 32 loperamide a day, but it's still overactive. Gosh, okay, that's quite a lot. Yeah, again, just get some advice from your stoma nurse or from a gastroenterologist, and you know, potentially contact the stoma nurse helpline, and they may be able to help you. And SOS is this if you didn't catch it. And that might be good for children as well. It has a slightly better taste than diaryl, so you know, give that a try as well. And again, it's just trying to find, my stoma has definitely slowed down over the years, so it's a little bit better behaved now than it was to begin with. And that's really just through diet manipulation, use of loperamide, and making sure that I get my hydration right. So that fluid absorption and fluid balance is better in my body. Is it right we should avoid sugar-free juice and only drink full fat? So full sugar drink, well, this concept, so Sarah, thank you for that. This concept of needing some glucose within the drink to aid absorption is really, I think, probably what you're getting at there. But from a health perspective, we want to try and reduce lots and lots of unnecessary sugar in the diet. So have your sugar, if you like, in your drink where you're getting your sodium to get that absorption ability from the fluid. And maybe in other drinks, go for a mixture of kind of some sugar-free stuff. But you know, there's theories around artificial sweetener as well not being great for the body. So try and choose as natural foods and drinks as possible. But it's around personal taste. And if you enjoy a flavour of drink, you're going to drink more, and your fluid levels will be better. So you know, that again is a really important aspect of it, is finding a drink that you enjoy, and if you enjoy it, you'll drink more of it, particularly for kids and for older people. And just on the point of getting older, as we get older, maybe into our 70s and 80s as well, for older people, our thirst mechanism starts to change, so we don't have the same thirst sensation as we might have done when we were younger. So relying on thirst as we get older as a sort of prompt to drink isn't very reliable. So having a reminder bottle, like I was talking about earlier, with these little reminders on it, having some kind of visual reminder, remember to drink, those sorts of things can be good. I stick one of these by the toilet so my children can take them. They're big grown-up smelly men now, but put it by the toilet so people can actually just have a little visual cue and go, oh, actually, yeah, maybe I need to go and drink a little bit more. And it's just having visual cues, reminders, bottles like that, carrying a drinks bottle around with you all the time, so you're kind of you're prepared and you don't get into a situation where you get caught out. My husband, I talk about him a lot because his hydration strategy isn't the best, and he went off to the rugby last year, and he was going up for the whole day. And of course, because he doesn't take a handbag with him, he didn't take a drink with him for the whole day. And then the next day, of course, he's got a blinding headache. And I think, when you've got, you can't get away with very much. You've really got to, you've really got to kind of get the balance right and work on it. And the thing I'll just kind of wrap up by saying is, these kind of feelings of grogginess, feeling tired, fatigued, irritable, these are kind of signs of this kind of low-level chronic dehydration. And it doesn't have to be like that. You don't accept that as the norm. We need to try and aim for optimum hydration. And optimum hydration is achieved by balancing output with fluid balance and getting the right drinks into the body so that you're feeling energized and you're feeling ready to go, and you're not sort of grumpy and headachy and feeling unwell. And it's a really fine balancing act. And it takes a bit of work and a bit of strategy and just constantly keeping on top of it. So you find what works best for you as an individual. So I really hope that helps. Andrew, sorry, your partner can't eat vegetables, also on magnesium, potassium supplements. Yeah, so really, specific situation there, and that sounds really challenging for her. I'm really sorry to see that. So please do reach out to our nurse advisor and your own team just to try and get a little bit more support on that. But for sure, making sure she's having St. Mark's solution and the right amount of dialyte will probably help. That's quite an individual situation. So yeah, I hope you can find some help with that a little bit more. But yeah, avoiding too much sugar and just trying to get a little bit more fluid balance would be great. So yeah, so I hope that has helped. If anybody's got any more comments, speak now. Because I'm going to wrap up. So I said at the beginning, none of the information in this video has been in replace of any information that you would get from your medical team, from your nurse, or for your own individual requirements. So I'm just trying to raise awareness of good hydration strategies, and just to think about finding your own strategy that's right for you. So thinking about looking at urine colour, thinking about the symptoms of kind of dehydration. And they're very subtle sometimes. They can sneak up on you without you realising. So that kind of headachy, grogginess, tiredness, feeling like you're in a bit of a fog, that can all be sort of just dehydration and feeling a bit under par. You're then less likely to exercise, you're less then likely to want to kind of just, be able to function and operate. So for me, as an athlete wanting to run and run ultras and participate in marathons, that has to be right and it has to be spot on. And it did take a little time to work out the right strategy for me. So things I've talked about tonight are right for me. They might not be right for you, but keep experimenting and keep trying with different things, because we don't have to accept feeling grotty and unwell. There are solutions to that, and just sometimes upping your hydration. Everyone to the pub for a sachet of dialyte. My husband actually puts mine in a wine glass for me, just to make me feel a little bit better sometimes. But yeah, it's not amazing. It's a boring strategy to have to maintain, but it does work. And it then enables you to feel well, to feel better, and to feel like you want to exercise. And those things are really important for good health. So it's this kind of holistic approach to good health, and not just thinking about it on its own, thinking about it as kind of, you know, your whole body. So yeah. So Mark's solution, we've created another video. If you go onto the Convatec website, I've created a video with the amount of the right amounts of glucose and sodium and sodium bicarbonate, and I've shown like a video how to make it up. But yeah, that's available. Google it, and it's available directly online. Anyway, thank you for joining me. I hope that's been useful, and I am going to wrap up now. So thank you very much for joining us. Good night.